It was a busy Friday night at the high-end restaurant called Bellagio's Garden, a place where the rich and powerful often came to eat, drink, and show off. The waiters wore neat black uniforms, the chandeliers sparkled like stars, and the food smelled so good that people walking outside would stop and stare through the windows. Among all the fancy dishes and shining cutlery, a young waitress named Emily moved quickly from table to table, holding trays full of food and drinks, always smiling politely, no matter how tired she was inside. Emily had been working at this restaurant for almost 2 years. She wasn't from a rich family. In fact, life had been very difficult for her. She used to dream of becoming a professional pianist. Music was her first love. As a child, she would sit at the old upright piano in her parents' tiny living room and play for hours. Her father, who worked as a postman, saved money to pay for her lessons. Her mother always clapped and sang along. Emily got so good that her music teacher once told her she could get into any top music school if she kept practicing. But life doesn't always go the way we want. Her father died suddenly in a car accident when Emily was just 17. Everything changed overnight. Her mother fell sick from the stress and couldn't work anymore. Emily had no choice. She dropped out of her music program and started working to support her mom. She took up small jobs during the day and waitressed at night. Her hands that once danced on piano keys now carried heavy trays, cleaned tables, and scribbled down orders. She hadn't touched a piano in almost 3 years. That night, as she wiped her forehead and fixed her apron, she heard the sound of loud laughter coming from table 7. A group of 4 rich men had just walked in. One of them wore a designer suit, a golden watch that sparkled under the lights, and sunglasses, even though it was evening. He walked like he owned the place. His name was Victor Langston, a well-known millionaire in the city. He was famous for his luxury hotels, expensive parties, and a habit of showing off in public. He liked being the center of attention and enjoyed making others feel small. Victor and his friends sat down and began ordering the most expensive items on the menu. Lobster, imported wine, rare desserts, nothing was too much for them. They talked, loudly made jokes about the staff, and laughed when a junior waiter accidentally spilled a drop of sauce on the tablecloth. Emily watched quietly, keeping her distance until she had to serve them. When she finally brought their main course, Victor looked at her closely for the first time. "You're new here?" he asked, though he'd seen her before. "No, sir. I've been here for a while," Emily replied softly. Victor raised an eyebrow. You don't look like someone who belongs in a place like this," his friends chuckled. Emily smiled politely, used to such comments by now. She was about to walk away when one of Victor's friends, a man with a red tie and slick hair, said, "Hey, isn't she the one the manager mentioned? The girl who used to play piano?" Victor leaned back in his chair. "Really? You play piano?" "Used to," Emily replied, her voice quiet. Victor's eyes gleamed with mischief. "How interesting." "Tell you what," he said, reaching into his wallet and pulling out a thick roll of cash. He held up a crisp $1,000 bill. "If you can impress me by playing something on that piano over there." He pointed to the grand piano in the corner of the restaurant. "This is yours." The room suddenly grew quiet. Some guests turned their heads. Waiters paused. The piano in question was more for decoration than actual use. It sat there polished and untouched, mostly for show. Emily's heart beat faster. Her hands, which once glided over ivory keys with grace, now trembled slightly. She hadn't played in years. Her fingers were out of practice. The thought of performing in front of strangers, especially someone like Victor, made her feel nervous. Victor saw her hesitation and smirked. "Come on now, it's just a little fun. Or are you afraid?" His friends laughed again. One of them mimicked a piano-playing motion and pretended to yawn. The restaurant's manager appeared nearby, unsure whether to step in or let the moment play out. Emily looked around. All eyes were on her. Some faces looked curious, others amused. A few even looked sympathetic, as if expecting her to be embarrassed. She could have walked away. She could have said no. But something inside her refused. To let this man mock her dreams? Not again. She nodded slowly. All right, she said, her voice calm now. Victor raised an eyebrow. Really? All right then, impress me. Emily walked toward the piano. Her shoes tapped lightly on the marble floor. With every step, the air grew heavier. She sat down on the bench and gently opened the lid. Well, the keys were slightly dusty, but the piano was in tune. She took a deep breath. Her fingers hovered above the keys. They felt stiff, foreign. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. She closed her eyes, and then, from somewhere deep inside, a memory awakened. A melody she used to play for her father. It was slow, gentle, full of emotion. Her fingers began to move, slowly at first, then faster. Each note told a story of lost dreams, silent nights, and the weight of responsibility she carried too young. The restaurant went completely silent. Even Victor, who had leaned back with a smug look, now sat up straight. The joking stopped. Laughter faded. People forgot about their food. Even the chefs in the open kitchen peeked out. Emily didn't notice. She was lost in the music, her fingers dancing across the keys like they never forgot. All the pain, all the stress, all the buried dreams poured out through her hands. When the piece ended, the last note hung in the air like a whisper. There was a moment of total silence. Then someone clapped. Another followed. Soon the entire restaurant was filled with applause. Some people stood. Others wiped their eyes. A few simply stared in awe. Victor looked around, clearly shocked. He opened his mouth to say something but closed it again. His friends didn't laugh this time. They looked at each other, unsure of what just happened. Emily stood up slowly, her face calm, but her hands still shaking slightly. She returned to Victor's table, placed the empty tray on the stand, and said softly, "Thank you for the opportunity." Victor looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time, and just like that, everything began to change. Emily stood next to the piano, her breath uneven, her fingers still tingling from the performance. She hadn't played like that in years, and yet it felt like no time had passed. The entire restaurant had fallen quiet, as if time had stopped during those minutes. People were still clapping, and a few had even stood up to give her a standing ovation. But in Emily's mind, everything was still. She could only hear her heart beating fast, not from fear, but from something else, something deep. It was as if a part of her soul that had been asleep for so long had finally woken up. Victor sat at his table, stunned. His friends, who had been laughing and making fun of Emily just minutes earlier, now looked at her with wide eyes and open mouths. No. One expected her to play like that. Not him, not his wealthy friends, not even the staff who worked with Emily every day. It was like watching a butterfly come out of its cocoon. Beautiful and free. But the truth was, this moment hadn't come out of nowhere. Emily had once lived a very different life. Far from the trays and tables of Bellagio's garden, she had been born into a small, hard-working family. Her father, a kind and soft-spoken man, worked long hours delivering mail. Her mother stayed at home and took care of the house and Emily. They didn't have much money, but they had love and laughter. And that was enough. From a young age, Emily had shown a special love for music. When she was 5, she discovered a broken keyboard in their attic. Even though a few keys didn't work, she spent hours pressing the ones that did, playing random tunes, humming songs, and pretending to be a famous pianist. Her parents saw her joy and decided to buy her a second-hand upright piano from a neighbor who was moving away. It was old and scratched, but to Emily, it was a treasure. She began taking lessons from an elderly woman who lived 3 streets down. Miss Clarice had been a piano teacher for over 50 years. She taught Emily not just notes and rhythm, but how to feel the music, how to tell a story with her fingers. Emily practiced every day after school. Sometimes she forgot to eat, lost in the world of Chopin, Beethoven, and Mozart. By the time she was 13, she was winning local competitions. Teachers at her school talked about how gifted she was. One of them helped her apply for a summer program at a prestigious music academy. Emily was accepted and even offered a scholarship. Her parents were overjoyed, and her future looked bright. Everything seemed perfect, till one terrible night. It was raining hard when her father didn't return home from work. The police came a few hours later and delivered the news that broke everything. He had been hit by a drunk driver on his way back. He died on the spot. Emily was 17. The shock hit them like a storm. Her mother, who had always been strong, fell into depression. The bills started piling up. The house payments, the medical checkups, the food. Emily was still in school, but she knew what she had to do. She quit the academy, canceled her music lessons, and found a job at a local coffee shop. Music had to wait. Survival came first. Years passed like that. Emily worked during the day and looked after her mother at night. She moved from one job to another until she landed at Bellagio's garden. Paid better than the others and gave her just enough to manage her mother's medicines. But deep inside her heart, there was always pain. She missed the piano. She missed the feeling of creating music, of escaping the real world, even for a few minutes. Every time she walked past a music shop or heard someone playing a tune on the street, her heart ached. That's why, when Victor had challenged her to play, something had awakened. It was not just about the money or the embarrassment. It was about proving to herself that the girl she used to be wasn't completely lost. That there was still music in her fingers and hope in her heart. As Emily walked back to the kitchen after her performance, the staff looked at her differently. Her friend Sarah, another waitress, hugged her with tears in her eyes. "Emily," she whispered, that was magic. Emily smiled, wiping a tear from her own cheek. "I thought I forgot how to play," she said. "You didn't," Sarah said. "You just stopped believing in yourself." Behind her, the restaurant manager stood quietly. He had seen Emily struggle for months, always on time, always polite, always tired, but never once had he guessed that she carried such a gift inside her. Victor, meanwhile, sat still at his table, staring at the piano. For once, he had nothing clever to say. His friends were silent, too. It was clear they didn't know how to react. The game had backfired. The waitress they thought they could laugh at had just stolen the night. Victor took out the $1,000 bill again, held it in his fingers and waved at Emily to come over. She hesitated for a second, then walked. To him, that was impressive, Victor said, forcing a smile. "Here's your reward. You earned it." Emily looked at the money, but didn't take it. "I don't want your money," she said simply. "I didn't play for you. I played for me." The words hit harder than Victor expected. He wasn't used to people saying no to him, especially not waitresses. He lowered the bill slowly. "Then why did you do it?" he asked Dot. Emily looked at him, her voice steady. "'Cause I needed to remember who I used to be." Victor didn't know what to say. Later that night, after the restaurant had closed and the lights were dimmed, Emily stayed back for a while. She returned to the piano, this time with no audience, no challenge, no pressure, just her and the keys. She played softly a tune she had written long ago. It was a piece she never finished. Her fingers moved slowly, carefully, as if afraid the music would disappear again. But it didn't. The notes came back, one by one, and the music filled the quiet room like a warm blanket. Her manager watched from the shadows, unnoticed. When she finished, he stepped forward. "That was beautiful," he said. Emily smiled shyly. "Thank you. Why didn't you tell anyone you could play like that?" "I guess I didn't think it mattered anymore." "Does now," he said. "You reminded everyone tonight that talent doesn't come with a title or money. It comes from the heart." Emily nodded, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She walked home that night, the stars shining above her. Her mother was waiting. Up, worried as always. "How was work?" her mother asked. Emily sat next to her and took her hand. "It was different." "I played the piano again." Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "You did?" "Yes, and for the first time in a long while, I felt alive." Her mother hugged her tightly, and for the first time in years, both of them cried. Not from sadness, but from hope. What had started as a challenge, a joke meant to embarrass her, had turned into something far greater. Emily hadn't just played music that night. She had reclaimed a piece of herself. While she didn't know what would happen next, one thing was clear. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a musician. Again. As the final note of Emily's performance slowly faded, the restaurant remained frozen. No one moved. It was like time itself had stopped to listen. Her hands rested gently on the piano keys, her head bowed slightly, her eyes closed. For those few minutes, she hadn't been a waitress. She hadn't been the tired girl who worked double shifts or the daughter worrying about hospital bills. She had been an artist, pouring her whole heart into the music, and everyone had felt it. Then, all at once, the room came back to life. Someone clapped, then another. The claps grew louder until the entire restaurant was applauding her. Some people even stood up. There were cheers and whistles, and even the people sitting near the kitchen doors turned their heads to see who had just made the grand piano speak so beautifully. The staff in the kitchen stood frozen, holding plates mid-air, eyes wide open. No one had ever seen a moment like this before. Emily stood up slowly. She turned to face the crowd, her cheeks red, not from shame, but from something new pride. She hadn't expected any of this. She had just wanted to remember what it felt like to play. But this reaction, this overwhelming joy, it felt like a dream. She looked around and saw people smiling at her with real admiration. There was no pity in their eyes, no judgment, just respect. One man near the bar wiped away a tear. A woman near the window was recording the scene with her phone. Even the couple who had been arguing earlier now sat hand in hand, as if the music had softened their anger. And then there was Victor. He wasn't clapping. He was sitting perfectly still, his fingers pressed together, his eyes locked on Emily. His usual smirk was gone. For once he looked ... quiet, almost thoughtful. His friends had stopped laughing too. One of them looked at the other, clearly unsure how to respond to what just happened. Victor stood up and walked slowly to the piano. People parted like waves, clearing a path. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the $1,000 bill again. Held it in front of Emily, offering it with a small nod. But Emily shook her head. "I didn't do it for the money," she said softly but clearly. Victor looked confused for a moment. "Then why did you do it?" She looked him in the eye. "Because I needed to feel like myself again." Victor didn't know what to say. It was the first time someone had turned down his money in front of a crowd. He stood there, awkward and unsure, then slowly lowered the bill and slipped it back into his pocket. He gave her a tiny nod and returned to his table, quiet as a shadow as he sat down. One of his friends whispered, "She's incredible." Victor didn't answer. He just stared at his drink, lost in thought. The restaurant buzzed with excitement. Waiters whispered to each other. Guests began to ask questions. Who is she? Does she play professionally? Why is she working here? Someone said. She should be on a stage, not carrying plates. The piano, which had once just been a fancy piece of furniture in the corner, was now the center of attention. It had come alive through Emily's hands, and now it seemed like even the air around it had changed. A few minutes later, the restaurant returned to its regular rhythm. People went back to eating, chatting, and drinking. But the atmosphere had changed. It felt warmer, lighter, like something magical had passed through. Emily went back to work, but now every customer greeted her with kind smiles. Some thanked her. One little girl even gave her a drawing of a piano with hearts around it in the kitchen. The staff applauded her as she walked in. The head chef, a grumpy man who rarely smiled, gave her a respectful nod. "You've got golden hands," he said. Emily laughed shyly. "Thank you, chef." But deep inside, her heart was still racing. She hadn't felt this alive in years. It was as if something locked away inside her had broken free. Then something unexpected happened. A woman who had been sitting near the back of the restaurant stood up and walked over to her. She was dressed in a simple navy dress, but something about her presence was strong. She had been watching Emily the whole time, her eyes calm and curious. "Excuse me?" the woman said, smiling. "I'm sorry to bother you while you're working. My name is Rachel Cortez." Emily smiled politely, unsure what to say. I'm a music producer, the woman continued. I work with independent artists, mostly classical, cinematic, and some jazz. I couldn't help but hear your performance. That was more than beautiful. That was something special. Emily blinked. Oh, thank you. I mean it, Rachel said. You don't just play, you feel every note. That's rare. Very rare, Emily. Felt her chest tighten with a mix of nerves and excitement. I haven't played in a long time. Well, you should, Rachel replied. I'd love for you to come to my studio sometime, just to play. No pressure. I'd like to hear more. She reached into her purse and handed Emily a business card. It was simple, but elegant. Call me when you're ready, she said, even if it's not right away. Let's think about it. With that, she smiled again and returned to her table, leaving Emily standing there in stunned silence. A music producer. She couldn't believe it. It felt like the universe had suddenly opened a small window for her, one she thought had been locked forever. That night, after the last guest had left and the restaurant lights were dimmed, Emily sat alone at the piano once again. Her fingers hovered above the keys, unsure of what to play. Then, slowly, she began to improvise. Not a song she had practiced, not something from memory, just a melody from her heart, soft, emotional, and full of longing. Unseen by her, the manager stood nearby, watching silently, smiling to himself. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The next morning, Emily's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. At first, she thought it was a mistake. But when she opened her messages, she saw videos of her performance had been uploaded online by one. Of the guests, the video had gone viral overnight. Thousands of views, then tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. Comments flooded in. Who is this girl? She plays like she's telling a story. I cried watching this. She needs to be on a bigger stage. This is why you never judge a book by its cover. People started sharing her name, tagging the restaurant, asking for more videos. Some offered donations. Some offered her opportunities. Even a famous pianist shared the video with the caption, "This is what real music feels like." Emily sat on her bed, her hands covering her mouth, tears in her eyes. She had never imagined this. All she had wanted was to remember the girl she used to be. But the world had responded with open arms, as if saying, "We've been waiting." "For you," she got a message from her old piano teacher, Miss Clarice. The message simply read, "Emily, I always knew you had something special. Please come visit me. I'm so proud of you." Emily held the phone to her heart. So many emotions flooded her at once. Joy, fear, hope. She felt like her life was standing at a crossroads, one path leading back to safety and routine, the other forward into the unknown. Later that day, she walked past a small music shop on her way to buy groceries. In the window was a piano. It's not new, not expensive, but beautiful. She went inside and sat at the bench. The shopkeeper watched curiously as her fingers began to play. The melody floated through the small shop, stopping. Customers in their tracks. When she finished, the shopkeeper asked, "Are you a professional?" Emily smiled softly. "Not yet," she said, "but maybe soon." Because for the first time in years, she didn't just hope, she believed, and the sound of her belief echoed in every note she played. Emily's world changed quickly after her piano performance at the restaurant. She didn't expect it. She hadn't played for fame or attention. She simply wanted to feel alive again, even for just a few minutes. But life had other plans. That short moment, those few minutes, when her fingers danced across the keys, opened a door she thought had been shut forever. The video recorded by a diner during her performance went viral overnight. She didn't even know it had been filmed. At first, her phone just kept buzzing. Dozens of messages, then hundreds. She thought something was wrong. But when she opened the links her friends were sending, she saw herself on screen sitting at the restaurant piano, lost in the music. The caption read, "A waitress stunned the whole restaurant." You have to see this. Millions of people did. Within a few hours, thousands had shared the video. People left comments in different languages. Some asked who she was. Others said, her music made them cry. Famous musicians and music lovers reposted the video, calling her the unknown star and the pianist with the heart of gold. Even news pages picked it up, sharing headlines like Waitress shocks restaurant with once-in-a-lifetime performance and hidden talent discovered at fancy restaurant. Emily couldn't believe it at first. It felt unreal. She scrolled through the comments with tears in her eyes. Complete strangers were calling her an inspiration. They were saying things like, "Her music touched my soul," or "I haven't felt this way from a piano in years." She read them over and over, her hands covering her mouth. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. All she knew was something incredible was happening. But along with all the attention came something else. Her old dream, the one she had buried so deep it hurt to think about, began to rise again. The dream of playing music, not just as a hobby, but as a way of life. The dream of performing in front of crowds, of recording albums, bringing her father's dream for her to life. And this time, the world seemed ready to help her chase it. Rachel Cortez, the music producer who had given Emily her card at the restaurant, messaged her the very next day. Her message was kind and warm. She said she had seen the video online, and now she was even more convinced that Emily had something special. She invited Emily to her studio again. "No pressure," she wrote. "Just come and play." Emily hesitated at first. So long since she had been in a real studio. What if she wasn't good enough anymore? What if the video was just a lucky moment and she couldn't do it again? But then she remembered how she had felt at the piano, the peace, the freedom, the emotion. That feeling was real. And if she wanted her life to change, she had to be brave enough to try. She agreed to meet Rachel. The studio was in a quiet part of the city, surrounded by trees and music shops. Emily had never been inside a professional studio before. She walked in. She was surprised. It wasn't flashy or cold. It was warm, filled with soft lights, wooden floors, and walls lined with instruments. There were shelves of vinyl records, soundproof rooms, and a big black grand piano in the main room. Rachel greeted her with a hug. "I'm glad you came," she said with a smile. Emily sat at the piano, took a deep breath, and began to play. Not something from a book, not something famous. She played her own melody, one she had written in her mind during lonely nights, while walking home from work, or lying awake thinking about her father. Rachel listened quietly. She didn't speak. She didn't take notes, just closed her eyes and felt the music. When Emily finished, Rachel simply said, "You're ready." Emily didn't understand. "Ready for what?" Rachel smiled. "Ready to tell your story to the world?" Over the next few weeks, Emily began recording her first original piece. Rachel introduced her to musicians, sound engineers, and even a few songwriters who helped her build around her melodies. Emily wrote her own music, but with their help. She shaped it into something bigger, something more polished, yet still deeply hers. She worked hard. Every spare minute she wasn't at the restaurant, she was in the studio. Some nights she barely slept, but she didn't care. For the first time in years, she had something that made her excited to wake up every day. Meanwhile, her life outside, the studio was changing too. The restaurant had become famous. People started coming not for the food, but for the girl who played the piano. Many customers asked for Emily. They brought flowers, letters, even gifts. Some just wanted to say thank you for the music that touched their hearts. Emily felt overwhelmed, but grateful. Her co-workers supported her. Sarah, her closest friend, at the restaurant often joked, "Soon you'll be too famous to serve bread." Emily laughed, but deep inside, part of her was still scared. She had never asked for attention. She had never wanted to be in the spotlight. But now, she was slowly realizing that her music wasn't just for her anymore. It was for everyone, who needed it just like she had needed it on her hardest days. Then one morning, something happened that made it all feel real. Rachel called and said a music label had reached out. They had seen the video and heard the track Emily recorded. They wanted to sign her. Emily was speechless. A real label, a contract, a future. She met with them a few days later, and after careful talks and reading through the contract with Rachel's help, she signed it. That night, she stood on her apartment balcony looking up at the stars and whispered, "Dad, I did it." She knew he would have been proud. Soon after that, Emily performed her first small concert. It was at a local theater, not huge, but full of people who had seen her online and wanted to hear her live. Her mother sat in the front row, smiling through tears. Her co-workers, including Sarah and the head chef, took the night off to cheer for her. Emily walked onto the stage in a simple black dress. No fancy lights, no backup dancers. Just her and her piano. The same fingers that had once served drinks now played melodies that brought people to tears. When she finished, the applause lasted for minutes. Flowers were thrown onto the stage. People stood and clapped with joy in their eyes. After the show, a little girl came up to Emily with her mother. The girl held a tiny notebook and asked shyly, "Can you sign this?" Emily bent down, smiling. "Of course." The mother said, "She started taking piano lessons because of you. She watches your video every night." Emily hugged the girl. "Keep playing. Music will always be your friend." Moments like that reminded her why this journey mattered. Back at the restaurant, Victor came again one evening, alone this time. He didn't come with friends or with jokes, just sat quietly at a corner table and watched as Emily helped serve. One last night before leaving her job for good, when she walked past him, he stood up. "I owe you an apology," he said. "That night I thought I was making a joke, but you taught me something important." Emily looked at him, calm and kind. "Thank you for the challenge," she replied. "It pushed me to remember who I am." Victor nodded. "Well, the world knows now. I'm glad I was there to see it happen." He left a generous tip and walked out. More thoughtful than the man who had walked in weeks ago, Emily's last night at the restaurant was filled with hugs, laughter, and tears. The staff made her a cake shaped like a piano. The manager gave her a small music box that played a tiny melody. Her apron was signed by all her co-workers. Sarah cried the most. "You'll always be family," she said. "I'm not going far." Emily smiled. "It's just finally going where I belong." As she stepped outside that night, the city lights sparkled, and a gentle breeze brushed her hair. She looked up at the sky and smiled, her heart full of gratitude. The girl who once cleaned tables and served food was now serving something else. Hope, beauty, and music, and the whole world was listening. Emily's life was no longer the same. The girl who once wiped tables and rushed from kitchen to dining room was now performing in concert halls, recording music in real studios, and being interviewed on popular shows. Her name was on magazine covers and music blogs. People called her the pianist with a soul, and many said her story gave them hope. But through all the fame and attention, Emily stayed humble. She never forgot where she came from or who she used to be. Her first official song, the one she had written late at night in her small bedroom, was released online. Within days, it had millions of plays. Listeners wrote comments saying her music helped them through tough days, made them feel less alone, or even inspired them to start playing instruments again. Emily read every single comment with tears in her eyes. Her music was not just entertainment. It was healing people and healing her too. Soon after the release, she was invited to perform at a charity concert. The event was for children who had lost parents, something very close to Emily's heart. She remembered how she had lost her father, how her world had fallen apart, and how music had been her way back to life. That night, she walked on stage in front of hundreds of people and told them her story, how a waitress had become a pianist again. She ended the speech by saying, "Dreams don't die. Sometimes they just sleep for a while." When she sat at the piano, she played her heart out. Every note was filled with emotion. The crowd sat in silence, listening, feeling. When she finished, many people stood and clapped for so long that she had to come back for an encore. One small boy in the front row, who had been silent the whole time, whispered to his mother, "I want to play piano like her." Emily smiled. That one sentence meant more to her than any award or check. With her growing popularity, she was able to earn enough money not just to support herself, but to pay off all her mother's medical bills. She moved her mom into a better home with clean air and friendly neighbors. Her mom, who once worried every night about rent and medicines, now spent her days listening to Emily's music, proud and peaceful. Sometimes she would look at her daughter and say, "Your father would be so proud." And Emily always replied, "He's listening. I feel it every time I play." Though she was busy, Emily made time to visit her old piano teacher, Miss Clarice. The elderly woman had tears in her eyes when she opened the door and saw Emily holding a bouquet of flowers and a signed copy of her new album. They sat for hours, talking about old lessons, lost time, and the joy of music. Emily promised to play at the community center nearby, where Miss Clarice now volunteered. She kept that promise, performing for free in front of a small crowd of children and elderly people. She knew music belonged to everyone, not just those who could buy expensive tickets. One day, her manager called with exciting news. A famous orchestra overseas had invited Emily to perform with them. It was a huge honor, something most musicians waited their whole careers to experience. The concert would be held in Paris at one of the grandest music halls in the world.
Emily was
Nervous, but also excited. She had always dreamed of playing on stages like that, but now that it was real, it almost didn't feel true. When she arrived in Paris, she was treated like a star. Reporters wanted interviews, fans asked for autographs, and camera crews followed her as she entered the grand concert hall for rehearsals. But despite all the attention, she stayed focused. She remembered her promise to herself, no matter how big the stage. She would always play with the heart of that same girl who used to play in her small living room. The night of the performance, the hall was filled with thousands of people. The lights dimmed. The orchestra began playing, and then it was Emily's turn. She walked to the center, sat at the grand piano, and placed her fingers gently on the keys. For a moment, she closed her eyes. In that silence, she imagined her father sitting in the front row, smiling. She imagined her mother at home, watching the live broadcast on television. She imagined her co-workers from the restaurant cheering from afar. Then she began to play. The piece she performed was a mixture of classical and original music. It was powerful, emotional, and deeply personal. The audience was silent, completely drawn into her world. When she played the final note, the hall erupted in applause. People stood, clapped, and cheered for minutes. Some even cried. The conductor hugged her. The musicians smiled with respect. Emily stood and bowed, her heart full. After the concert, during an interview, a reporter asked, "What would you say to the young girl you once were, the one who gave up music to take care of her family?" Emily smiled gently and said, "I'd tell her thank you. You were strong when you didn't have to be. And because of you, I'm here today." Back home, the restaurant where Emily had once worked had become even more famous. People from all over visited, hoping to sit at the same table where the millionaire had challenged the unknown waitress. The restaurant owners placed a framed photo of Emily at the entrance with the words, "She once served food here. She serves the world with music." 1 year later, on a quiet Sunday evening, Emily returned to the restaurant not as a waitress, but as a guest of honor. The staff had planned a surprise celebration to thank her for all she had done. Her old co-workers hugged her tightly, and the head chef even cried a little. Sarah, her closest friend there, had made a scrapbook filled with photos, notes, and memories from their time together. At the center of the restaurant was the same piano she had once played that unforgettable night. It had been polished, repaired, and placed under a soft spotlight. Small plaque on the side read, "The night the music returned." Emily sat down at the piano, looked around at the faces smiling at her, and began to play. The melody was soft, sweet, and full of gratitude. She wasn't performing for cameras or reporters this time. She was playing for her friends, for her past, for the place where her journey began. The restaurant was silent once again, just like that first night. But this time, there was no doubt in anyone's mind about who she was. When she finished, the room exploded with applause. People stood, clapped, and cheered louder than ever. Some had tears in their eyes. Emily stood, bowed, and looked around, her eyes shining in that moment. It was clear Emily was no longer just the girl who had been discovered. She was the girl who had never truly been lost. Her music had always been inside her, waiting to come back. All it needed was a chance. And that chance had come when a millionaire had tried to make a joke, never knowing it would change a life and many others forever. That night, as she walked home under a sky full of stars, Emily thought about everything. that had happened. The struggles, the sacrifices, the doubts, and finally, the music. She realized something powerful. Sometimes life brings you down just so you can rise even higher. And sometimes, the smallest moment, one piano, one challenge. One song can open the door to everything you were meant to become. Emily looked up at the stars and smiled. The world had finally heard her voice, and she was just getting started.